And welcome to The Verdict. Kent Meyers and Mick Cornett joining you again this Sunday morning. We are pleased you would join us. Mick, we've got an old friend coming back, Bob Blackburn.
Yeah, and we never allow enough time for Bob. He's so full of good stories and good humor that it seems like the shows go very, very quickly. So put on your seatbelt. We'll hope to cover a lot of topics.
Yeah, we'll be moving pretty fast. Today, we're going to be visiting with recently retired Bob Blackburn, who was head of the Oklahoma History Center for a number of years since its inception. And we'll be back in just a minute. You're watching The Verdict.
Right now, 6 feet can feel like a long ways away. But from 6 feet, we can still smile at each other. From our doorways and our stairways, from opposite sides of the street and opposite sides of the country. Through fear and frustrations, we can remind each other that we are still here for each other. Because we can still smile at each other. And we're not going anywhere.
Soccer has been such an important part of my life. It's been my life for 18 years. It's an amazing experience to be a part of the Big 12 championship team in 2017 with the OSU Cowgirls. And looking back, it's one of the best things that has happened to me. I'm Lana Duke, I'm a medical student, and I'm Chickasaw. There is a need for physicians in rural and underserved areas of Oklahoma, and that's where my heart is. I definitely want to stay here and practice in Oklahoma and give back to the community that has given me so much. And I want to make my family proud, and Chickasaws proud too, and ultimately make other people have healthier, happier lives is what I really set out to do.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofanation.com.
Welcome back. Kent Meyers and Mick Cornett joining you this morning. And we are very pleased to have joining us as a guest, Dr. Bob Blackburn, recently retired executive director of the Oklahoma History Center. Dr. Blackburn is making his sixth appearance here on The Verdict. He did his undergraduate work at Southwestern Oklahoma State University, did his master's and his PhD work at Oklahoma State University. He is a 40-year historian. He's a historian emeritus in Oklahoma. I made that title up, but it probably will be bestowed someday. He planned the Oklahoma History Center, helped in its development and its construction, and has been its executive director until just this year when he recently retired. Bob, welcome back.
Well, thank you, Kent, and Mick. Thank you for the invitation. It's always good to be with you.
Bob,
you always keep the conversation really lively.
You look really good. Retirement must be agreeing with you.
It is. No tie, smile. So, yeah, what could go wrong?
And I'm assuming you're one of those guys that retired but didn't quit working.
Oh, yeah. In fact, Debbie's already angry at me. I can't say no. I've got to learn how to say no. And I have 3 book contracts still in the queue and 2 museum exhibit design contracts. And I may be going for a major museum exhibit here soon. I enjoy working on museum exhibits. That surprised me. I always knew I'd write books, which I have, but the exhibits are fun. I've done enough of those over the years now. I want to do a few more. I've got some ideas.
I have started what I think is your most recent release, and the book you have done with David Holt on the Fred Jones family and the Fred Jones Corporation. Tell us about that project.
Oh, I tell you, one reason I've written 26 books now, and I have 3 more, is that I always learn something. In this particular case, I came to appreciate Fred Jones more than I ever had. He was such a quiet, modest community leader. I think he deserves the majority of the credit for getting Tinker Air Force Base and the Douglas Bomber Plant. He was embedded in the Department of the Army. and the war production office before the war began. He was the insider. Chamber of Commerce, other leaders, kind of the outside looking in. If they wanted to get inside, they went to Fred while he was there for a year and a half. And then, of course, developing his business plan for selling and servicing cars, his community investments, his oil companies, his hotels. The guy was an entrepreneur of the first class, and I really enjoyed learning about him and knowing that his grandsons, Fred, Kirk, and
Boots.
Thank you, have carried on and done very well with it and have increased their imprint on our city. And of course, I know they've worked well with you when you were mayor. And so I just came to, I really gained a new respect for that entire family and its impact on Oklahoma going back to 1916 when Fred came here.
Mick, I'd like to talk to Bob just a minute about what he sees as the progress of the Oklahoma History Center up to date under your tutelage. What did the History Center accomplish in the years since 1999, I guess it was, up to today?
Well, that's when we started the planning on the History Center. That's a 215,000 square foot. And it's not just a museum. A lot of people think it's a museum. It's a community center. It's a research center. And of course, I put that against the backdrop of the Oklahoma Historical Society, where I worked for 42 years. And that organization goes back to 1893. And the original intent was to collect newspapers. And since then, we've been collecting. And I always like to remind people that the heart of the Oklahoma Historical Society are the collections. What we do with them, really, to me, tracks the success or the failure. So we collect, we preserve, and we share. And the History Center has allowed us to expand collections. For the last 10 years, we've been averaging over 400 collections a year. Some of those, like Glenn Johnson's collections, are now coming in. That probably has somewhere around 500,000 objects in it. Well, 400 collections a year. We have the museum exhibit space to share it, and we've gone digital. In the last 15 years, we are now in the top 5 states in the nation on the number of artifacts and documents online, searchable for free. Right now, we're getting close to about 5 million pages of newspapers. By 2024, it'll be over 10 million pages of newspapers. So you can go back to your hometown, put in a key name, and it'll pop up any article that mentions that name. It's going to change historiography. But the ability to do exhibits on the war in Vietnam, to do exhibits on immigration, the newest one that just opened, from launch to landing, about Oklahomans involved in space and flight. To be able to do all of that allows us to reach out to people like I've worked with both you and Mick on bringing collections in and doing films and sharing. And you and I are not talking about music pioneers in Oklahoma City history. I learn every time I have a conversation with someone like you to bring a collection in. So the Historical Society, for me, provided the perfect stage to take my passion for history, my credentials, my skill set, and to try to pull it all together into making it sustainable and a new brand. And I think we have that. We now have a new executive director, Trey Thompson, to work with the Dan Provos and the Kathy Dixons and the Chad Williams of the world. And they're going to sustain the progress we've made, and I think climb new mountains that a new person, a new set of eyes helps any institution. And I think Trey, who has all the credentials, can do that.
What is the prognosis for the History Center? Is it going to kind of continue the template you laid out for it, or do you expect Trey to cut a new path?
Well, I think where Trey can catch up is with social media. I'll never forget, he and I were traveling around the state looking at we still have about 25 museums and sites. We put 2,000 miles on the car just in January. Well, one day we were in this conversation. He said, "That sounds like a podcast." And he said, "Bob, what's your favorite podcast?" And I say, "Okay, I've never listened to a podcast. I don't know." Well, that shows this generational divide. I'm 69, Trey's in his 40s. He listens to podcasts when he's on the road, going to work, going home from work, on a trip. And so he asked me then to co-host a podcast. So I am now doing a podcast never having listened to a podcast. And he'll be much more active. Of course, I've had younger staff who have their own social networking sites, but I don't do that. I still don't have a Facebook page. I've never tweeted. Don't have a tweet account, whatever that is. But Trey knows, and he will talk that language with younger people. And I think that'll reach a new audience that we've never reached. And then we've got the professional staff, a unified board of directors. I think the History Center, the Historical Society is in great shape. Trey wrote his first column for the Mistletoe Leaves. I've been doing that now for 30 years. And in it, he said he's amazed at the quality of our staff, how much they've done with declining resources. We had 54% budget cuts from the legislature in a 12-year period. But we're still producing more. Well, how do we do it? That's the mystery of getting a lot of people working together with a common cause, with a lot of passion, a lot of volunteers, a lot of partners, and being able to blend public resources with private, which goes back to the heart of MAPS, and making sure everyone is going the same direction. I think I was able to pull that off in the 42 years. Trey, I think, can do that, and he recognizes the quality of that staff and the board members and the passion for history among people like you two. You two would be sustainers. And that goes all over the state. I can go to any community and talk about people I know who have saved local history. I was in Enid on Tuesday and met again. They said a nice goodbye to me and thank you for working with them. I was in Altus, again, where we built a new museum. And in Enid, that was an $8 million museum. We've done the same thing in Clinton and in Park Hill near Tahlequah, Honey Springs Battlefield. I could rattle off a lot of projects that I've taken on over the years and met a lot of cool people. And I like to share all the credit with all of them.
We just got about a minute left, Mick.
Well, Bob, what's next for you? And remember, we just have a minute left, but what type of projects are you looking for or open to? Well,
of course, I'll always write books. And so I'm finishing a book on Manhattan Construction Company, and you two have probably worked with Manhattan. That's been around since 1896 and started in Chandler, Oklahoma, now in Tulsa. But I've really enjoyed that. I am doing a revised, updated version of Clara Luper's book, Behold the Walls, with Carlos Hill from OU. OU Press will publish that book in 2022, more accessible. But museum work is really, I think, where my passion is taking me now. I like working in that three-dimensional world of artifacts, videos, and creating a 1-hour experience for a visitor to see a complex story.
Bob, that's got to be the last word for this segment. Of course, you'll come back for another 9 minutes and just after commercial break. Folks, you're watching The Verdict with Mick Cornett, Kent Meyers, and our guest, Bob Blackburn. We'll be right back.
OU Law has a history and heritage that are unparalleled. At the University of Oklahoma College of Law, we empower our students to pursue the career of their dreams. We have the highest U.S. News ranking ever achieved by an Oklahoma law school. We are the first law school in the country to launch a college-wide digital initiative. And this year, our competition teams ranked #2 in the nation. OU Law, generations of excellence, limitless possibilities.
One of the best kept secrets about the post 9/11 GI Bill benefit is that it can be used at a trade school or a technical school, and it doesn't have to be used at a university or college. These are benefits that the veterans have earned through their service, and they should take advantage of it.
Veterans really need to understand that there are many resources offered by the Oklahoma Department of Veteran Affairs. They're there to help you find the right school for you, the school that will help you and your family make great steps into your future.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Kent Meyers, pardon me, and Mick Cornett. You're watching The Verdict with our guest, Dr. Bob Blackburn. Mick, where would you like to go from here?
Bob, I know one of your passions is the history of live television in Oklahoma City. Your mother was a fixture in some of those early days under the name of Ida B. But tell us your perspectives and what you've been able to accumulate and collect, and now kind of remind us of those early days.
Of course, as a historian who's looked at all of Oklahoma history, you can see the major impacts of different trends. Highway construction and automobiles obviously have changed the way we live, the way we think about our community. Tribal history is part of that. But I think a lot of people forget that television changed the way we communicate in the state. It changed what I call the crossroads of commerce, putting consumers with producers together. And the economic impact, the social impact of television was huge. First television broadcast in Oklahoma in 1949, one station in Oklahoma City, one station in Tulsa. By 54, there was another station. By 58, KOCO came around as one of your early experiences. In fact, Mick, that's where you and I met, when you were at KOCO. But those years of live TV were so unique. Today, we're saturated with television. Well, in those days, 3 channels, and people felt like they knew the people on that screen because it was coming live with all the mistakes that someone could make. That's one reason I think Mom was so successful, over 3,000 live shows, because she came on as this girl from Minnecaw, Oklahoma, just comfortable with someone in your home. And then when you look at others, whether it was in broadcasting, your area, or it was Foreman Scotty or Danny Williams or Ed Birchall and Ho-Ho, we knew those people. They were part of our lives. And this whole sense of community and shared, it had a huge impact. So everyone from our age up really grew up with live television. And if we don't understand the impact of television, we really cannot trace the development of the business community. Civil rights would be totally different without television, the power of television covering the civil rights movement of the 50s and bringing that into the homes of the people like me. I'd never grown up with a person from the African-American community. Suddenly you could see it. Wait a minute, they're beating these people. They're sticking dogs on them. You mean they don't have the same rights we have? This sense of awareness. Television changed so much in our culture and society. We need to keep remembering. That's why I've done 5 or 6 exhibits on television, still have one right now at the History Center, and we'll always continue to talk about it.
Well, we appreciate you taking in as part of your archives our shows, our verdict shows from inception, almost 20 years worth. We're glad that they're with you now.
Well, and thank you for that gift. And I can, looking the way I look at it, 50 years from now, people are going to go back to your collection with an index to find a community leader, hear what's going on, and get a better sense. We're not going to have the letters for our generation the way we've had it of our grandparents' generation. People wrote. Not doing that anymore. Things like your show will fill in the gaps.
Well, for better or for worse, they'll fill in the gaps. Talk a little bit about your work on the Heritage Hills preservation.
Well, to me, the backdrop there is the entire impact of historic preservation. Coming on the heels of urban renewal in the 1950s and 60s, and here in Oklahoma City, very aggressive city, always boom and bust. They went after urban renewal with a vengeance, lost a lot of buildings, a lot of character. Coming out of that was born the historic preservation movement, starting in 1966 with a congressional action. Lyndon Baines Johnson helped push that through Congress. Well, that's been with us since. The business community started embracing it with One Bell Central in the 80s, what is now still the library for OCU. And then the Skirvin Hotel would not have been possible without preservation. The first historic neighborhood was Heritage Hills. I had the good fortune of living there and got a contract to do a history of all 365 homes, converted that into a book that really raised awareness of the importance of preservation. And then most recently, First National Bank building, in my opinion, would never have balanced the books on what it would take to invest in it, to recover it, to use it, adaptive reuse, without historic preservation. 40% tax credits. And Gary Brooks is one of my modern day heroes. He's put everything in. He's like at a poker game. I'm all in. Gary Brooks has made that decision. His faith and that importance of that building, using the numbers of historic preservation, are going to allow it to be part of our community again, just the way the Skirvin is now, the way Old Central High School is now. Heritage Hills was the first in the historic preservation movement. I still live in Putnam Heights even today. Without preservation, we would not have the quality of life in Oklahoma City. Asian District would not have been possible. The Mid-City Renaissance, Auto Alley, Film Row, you go on and on.
Deep Deuce.
Deep Deuce. Without all of that, Oklahoma City is a different city today, without that turning point in 1966.
Bob, how is the way that students study history changed from when you were studying history? How do students in high school and college consume history now differently?
Well, I think the advantage we have now, and it's the good and the bad. The good is that students have much more access to materials. One of the projects I'm proud of at the Historical Society is that we published the Encyclopedia of Oklahoma History and Culture, and it's online. We're still adding digital articles to that. It was a 2-volume set. It was a turning point. Well, students have access to that. It's free. And so now if someone wants to know about the history of television, you can go to this summary. Well, the good teachers show their students how they can get to that. They may stumble on it if they're interested in history. Teachers need to say, no, you've got to understand your community. And here's a new tool. Textbooks today are about the same as what you and I had. Of course, you may remember, Mick, you and I are about the same age. We had Oklahoma history in one half of a semester. The other half was civics. They don't teach civics anymore, don't teach Oklahoma history very well. And I'm not downgrading coaches, but typically coaches would be teaching it. And it was read the book, take a test at the end of the week. I did not have good history teachers as an undergraduate. I really was, I've had great history teachers in college. We need to start earlier. We need to teach it a different way. To me, it should not be remember all these dates and the facts and the big picture. It should be stories, linking something that affects something else, connecting the dots. That's when the lights go on. Oh, I never thought of that. And connecting the dots can be done. The creative teachers can do that. The resources available can help with that. We're a big sponsor of History Day. That's still a growing program in the state. So Oklahoma history has changed a lot.
Bob, looking around the state at the rural areas, even some of the real small places, which communities, anecdotally, could you mention that have done a really good job of documenting their local history? Well,
surprisingly, one of the perennial top winners in both the junior high and high school is Burns Flat, out in Burns Flat. And you think, well, with the burden of losing that airport and the decline of population of rural Oklahoma and the changing, but somehow they've had the right teachers since the 1980s who have inspired these students. And every year it's like you're going to a pep rally. These students scream and yell if someone wins one of these prizes. And it's just, it's gratifying to see that enthusiasm. Here in the metro area, probably Putnam City, Moore High School has done very well in History Day, and Jinx is probably the top school in the state. They treat their field trips to our museums and sites not as extracurricular to them, it's core curriculum. They want their fifth graders to have the experience of one day in a one-room schoolhouse in Perry, Oklahoma. We started that program 20 years ago. They booked 5 years ahead. And one year when they couldn't do field trips, the parents raised enough money to still get those kids there. I've always appreciated that about Jinx.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's got to be our last word. We're completely out of time, but thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching The Verdict with Bob Blackburn. Mick and I will be right back for a final word.
It used to be okay in hospitals. It used to be okay in movie theaters. It was okay in classrooms, restaurants, and airplanes. But thanks to a greater understanding of the dangers, that's not okay anymore. So now that we know secondhand smoke causes lifelong health problems, Why is it still okay to smoke with children in the car? Bottom line, it's not okay. Let's get serious about protecting kids. Join the fight at stopswithme.com.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
You have children come from a different lifestyle, different mindset. You have to open your arms and really do what you have to do to have that child become a part of your family. And if it's more patience, that's what you do. Kids gotta know they can trust you. And that's what we try to do with these kids.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
Welcome back. Kent Meyers and Mick Cornett finishing off this wonderful show with Dr. Bob Blackburn. He is a historical treasure over and above what work he does. He just is a marvelous source of information and a great personality to deliver the information. Mick, your thoughts?
Well, when we started, I think I predicted or remembered that we never have enough time for a Bob Blackburn show. We always run out of time, and we did it again.
We did it again.
If you can get more information about Bob's lifetime of work at where he used to work, okhistory.org. That's the website of the Oklahoma History Center. And we have a website, theverdict.tv.
Well, that's got to be it for this week. You've been watching The Verdict, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.